Hello and welcome back to the Listening Lounge. My name is Nick Day, CEO of 𝐥𝐢𝐤 Recruitment Group, specialist HR and payroll recruiters. Today I am joined by a fascinating, exciting, and let me say very entertaining guest, Bryan Seely. Now, Bryan is someone who has advised the White House and is the only hacker and speaker to have successfully wiretapped the United States Secret Service and the FBI. Later that same year, my guest also de-anonymized the highly valued mobile app Secret, which put him on the front page of Wired.com, CNNMoney, CNET, Forbes, and the Washington Post, all on the same day. I mean, seriously, I am so excited. Bryan is a world-famous security keynote speaker, ethical hacker, author, former US Marine, and he's joining us today to talk about the importance of cyber security. Now, in the UK, with 81% of UK SMEs confirming they'd suffered a data breach or cyber attack, with a considerable 2 in 5, that's 37%, admitting they'd suffered multiple breaches, I was compelled to contact Bryan to invite him onto today's show because I think payroll and HR in particular are departments that are extremely vulnerable. And I want to find out exactly why and what we can do to protect ourselves a little bit better during the course of this episode. Now, Bryan's joining us from Seattle. Welcome, Bryan, to the show. How are you feeling?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Well, just to give the listeners a bit of context into some of the, before we get into the deep detail of the cyber type of questions, Bryan, do you mind just giving them a little bit of background to your story beyond what I've just mentioned there, to give them some insight into your, I guess, what's led you here today?
I grew up in Tokyo. My parents worked over there, and I left high school 2000, joined the Marine Corps, and have been in IT since about that time, 2002, 2004, 5, 6, around there. And I got divorced and got clean and sober around 2013, which is when I started really focusing more efforts on work and career and just trying to find ambition to play more than video games, and figured out I was kind of good at this in some aspects, maybe not in the decision-making process, because I wouldn't recommend wiretapping any federal agencies. They hate that.
Sure.
They're super. The only thing I think that sounded dumber is Brexit.
Yeah, well, probably a lot of listeners will probably agree with you on that front. But you become an ethical hacker, right? And this is one of the reasons I really wanted you on the show today, so to get into the serious side of what I think is really important and often overlooked, certainly in the payroll and HR departments globally. We will a lot of US listeners on this as well. I'm sure will be intrigued to know what your advice would be. But we're seeing huge increases in payroll fraud, recruitment scams, data breaches, corporate espionage. You name it, cyber attackers are kind of finding numerous routes now into organizations. And a lot of those routes are coming in through the payroll and HR departments because they're known to hold huge amounts of data, huge amounts of information, identifiable information. So from your perspective, if you were to put your sort of hacking head on, why is it that this data is so valuable to criminals? What first, why do they want access to it first and foremost to begin with?
A lot of people think that the ransomware is the biggest problem. It's not. It tends to be business email compromise. So if I can break in to your Office 365 environment or convince someone to click a link, and it really, if you have 500 people in your company and I send out 50,000 phishing messages with different types and things, someone's going to click the link. Someone's going to make that mistake. And that mistake can be really devastating because then I can give an email order to the CFO as the CEO saying, hey, I'm on a call. This invoice needs to get paid. Just came in. It's vital, blah, blah, blah. And make an urgency sort of demand. And it works. There's, in the United States alone, 3 billion or more has been lost this way. If that doesn't work, if they can't get you to willingly send money out, they proceed with like ransomware type things. It's like, well, if you're not going to play ball, then you're not going to have any stuff. We're going to hold your stuff for ransom. And it's a way for them to cover their tracks. So it makes it difficult to track and figure out who made the mistake, how they got in. So if you don't have access to online banking as a company employee, it doesn't mean you're not valuable to them. There's intellectual property, there's customer privacy information, there's always something of value.
One thing that's interesting when it comes to payroll and HR departments in particular is they're not just handlers of data in terms of employee data, in terms of addresses, names. They also have access to bank account details. They are distributing huge sums of money, often to multiple accounts, often cross-border as well. So with those kind of departments so vulnerable to attack, what additional recommendations would you make to an HR leader or a payroll leader listening to this now going, I need to make sure that's secure because we're paying out millions of pounds potentially every month. That's vulnerable. What are the standard things you would expect or you would suggest that they put in place to protect themselves from attacks?
Proper network segmentation so that if something happens to a receptionist, let's say, or someone in engineering, and there's ransomware of some kind, the ransomware traditionally is smart, but not smart enough to hack dynamically on its own. So it will go where it has permissions to go, and generally that's the same level of permissions that the person who installed it or accidentally installed it does. So how much damage can each person in your company do if they became a zombie?
Sure.
And they're going to go eat all their coworkers, unless they come in, they hit a locked door and they can't get the key card thing to work because zombies are terrible with keys. They mismanage with keys, I guess. So they can't go into that other door. They're not going to eat all those coworkers. That's segmentation of a physical boundary.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Network boundaries have physical controls to segment stuff. You're familiar with like a firewall, or a router. A router, all that does is it is a gateway or a door between physical networks, that like boundaries, and it doesn't necessarily maintain the same shape as the rooms or the building, but loosely it's based on cabling. So if there's checkpoints that data can't get through with certain rules, accounting should be segmented to only people in accounting, and only people at accounting's highest level have the highest permissions. It's difficult because it takes a lot of granular setup for most systems for people to do all this, and it's not everyone's favorite thing to do. It's like doing your taxes. It's like, I'm going to do that never if I could. But potentially if you put it in place, it's going to save you a lot of hassle. And then having those policies of using Slack instead of email, and having video calls and Zoom and those types of collaboration things. Some protocol assuming that people are going to hack your email. Assume that they're going to, because people make mistakes. People try to eliminate all the possible inboxes, all their email. They want to have it read so that they don't feel like they're being pressured. And eventually you just give up or come up with better rules, or you just start over with a new email address. But idea being, you can't just plow through stuff making these really fast decisions because your critical thinking goes out the window. Sure. So payroll and HR software is big business, really big business, both across the globe. US in particular, got some massive providers, some great, big providers in the UK as well. And I would say the good news is they're doing a lot of work to try and improve the security protocols, data security. But with all payroll databases vulnerable to attack, if you were a payroll or HR manager and you're looking at either checking you've got the right security protocols in place with your existing provider, or maybe even looking to change provider, what are the key questions they should be asking of their providers to make sure their data is secure? Who do the biggest boys play with? That's the research that I would do to find a good payroll provider. I haven't heard about Quicken or QuickBooks having major data breaches. I know I wouldn't trust Experian if they were my payroll provider. It's hard to know which companies are going to screw up and which ones aren't. Thank you for joining me for the Listening Lounge. And remember, every good conversation starts with good listening. Till next time.